What's up, meatbags? It's the often imitated, never duplicated TonyTGD, and I'm joined here by my man BomerneeTV himself, Bob, and we're going to be interviewing Gonzalo Varela. Now, if you're not familiar with this man, let me give you a little rundown. He's a composer, sound designer, guitarist. He's a Uruguayan native who has worked on 4 different video games, 16 music albums, 3 books, 1 concert film. But that's not all. He's also been 2 feature films, 12 short films, 10 theater plays, 1 institutional video. He's received awards from the Uruguayan Ministry of Education and Culture, Fulbright, as well as the Uruguayan Choral Association and Columbia College of Chicago, among others. This is probably the most educated person to ever come on this channel. I'm sorry to say that, Bob, but
no, it's true.
I think he's got us beat just by a little bit.
Definitely.
So I'm going to bring him out. I want everybody to pay attention because this guy knows what he's talking about when it comes to music. He's going to educate all of us, Mr. Gonzalo Varela. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's very nice to talk with both of you. And it's also very nice to practice my English because I haven't been doing that much in the last couple of years, especially like speaking. So thank you for that as well.
No problem. You're doing just fine.
Thank you. Hopefully it will get better and smoother as the interview goes on because it's a little rusty now.
Now, like I said, you sound just fine. You kind of remind me a little bit about like Leo Diaz. You got the same sort of accent, so I had to make sure that you weren't Leo in disguise. So let's start it off with you're a young man in Uruguay. What inspired you to go ahead and start creating music in and of itself? Because I know you do more than just video games. So what kicked off your musical career?
Okay, so it was a bit funny because I actually started with music pretty late compared to most people that actually have a career in music. I started playing guitar, practicing guitar at 16 years old. And before that, I didn't have any sort of exposure to like musicians in my family or anything like that. But I always liked making stuff. So I used to play a lot of games when I was a kid, and I was trying to learn coding, learning like Visual Basic, which isn't the best tool to make games, but I was just kind of learning it by myself, looking at tutorials and that kind of stuff. And I always liked kind of creating things on the computer. And when internet became more available in Uruguay, then I started like looking, kind of listening to more music. And I became kind of obsessed with guitarists, in particular, like virtuoso guitarists. So I really wanted to learn an instrument at that point. Then my parents got me a guitar, and I spent most of my time there, like just like kind of practicing guitar. And I did a lot of guitar playing and touring and also other instruments. And I also got a degree in guitar performance. But my main focus and my main interest was always in, as I said, making stuff. So that kind of led me to studying composition. And when I was a teenager, when I started playing guitar, I didn't have much time to play games anymore at all, because I spent all that time kind of practicing music and learning music. So what I found out is that kind of making music for games allowed me to kind of go back to my childhood years and be able to experience games again, and at the same time making music for them. So I don't know, that's I think that's the thing I like doing most in terms of music. It's making music, and particularly making music for games, probably.
Sounds awesome. So what games did you play as a child? What was your console of choice? Genesis or Super Nintendo?
Super Nintendo. I didn't have a Genesis out of those two. So my favorite game was Super Metroid. I played too many hours of that. But also other games that had like great music, like Donkey Kong Country games. And I also liked, of course, the Chrono Trigger soundtrack, even though I didn't have much of a chance to play that game because in Uruguay, RPGs weren't that common, probably because of the language difference, because you had to play those games in English, and not many people here was too fluent to play those games. But I did play a lot of Super Mario RPGs, so that's a good one as well.
And I think on one of the interviews you mentioned a game called Doomsday Warrior. You said you played
Yes. Yes, that's my. I don't know how that became my favorite fighting game, and probably the game that I spent the most time on the Super Nintendo. That was available to rent around here, as well as other games like Street Fighter 2 and Super Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat. But there was something about Doomsday Warrior that really hooked me, and it probably had to do with the music. I really liked the music in that game, and maybe it also had to do with the way that you do moves on that game. It's like holding backwards 2 seconds and then forward and attack, which is a bit easier for me to do than, I don't know how you call those, but like half a turn or something, like the Hadouken, half circle. So maybe it had to do with that, but I really, really love that game. I still have my physical copy here. I have some games. I'm not like a huge collector, but I collect some games, and I used to do that more. And the one game that I wanted to have, like with box and manual and instructions, was Doomsday Warrior that I got on Amazon, and they brought it to Uruguay.
If you have a Nintendo Switch out there, people listening to this, you can check out Doomsday Warrior. It is available on the Nintendo Switch, Super Nintendo Online thing. So you can go ahead and check out the game, check out the music at least, because I heard the gameplay is not too great.
Yeah, I went to the house of the developer Fight and Rage, Sebastian, and he knew that I was a fan of that game. So we played like one fight of that, and we were both like, this is not too great. Like, even myself, this is not as good as I remembered it. No.
Nostalgia is a hell of a drug.
Definitely.
All right. So, how many musical instruments do you play? Because I know you said you played guitar. Do you play anything else?
Yes, actually, the instrument that I probably played the most on concerts was bass guitar, because I joined a band that kind of played like I don't know how you call it in English, but it would be like dance music. Basically, here in Uruguay, we call it like música tropical, which would be like tropical music, like Latin dance music. And we used to play a lot in weekends and that kind of stuff. So I really played a lot of bass guitar, and also with another band later. But those are the instruments that I play myself when I produce the music, when I record my music. Those instruments I record like on audio, and I'm pretty proficient. And both classical and electric guitar. My degree is in classical guitar, but most of my playing in live gigs was electric. And then I can play some keyboards, but I mostly use that to write music. Yeah, those are the ones. I have played, like I have a theremin, which I don't know if you know what it is, but I can't play that. Yeah, that's a super hard instrument. It's probably harder than a violin to tune. It's crazy hard.
Anything you want to ask, Bob? I don't want to hog up all of Gonzalo's.
I was just thinking, and I'm just curious, like how much, I mean, with your experience in the video game industry and composition, like how much these days is more in the digital realm compared to like getting real musics? Because me and my friends, we kind of sometimes have this idea that like composers get an opportunity to conduct other musicians. Like how much interaction do you get to like direct other musicians, or is it mostly just on your own?
Well, that depends on the budget. So, for example, Fight and Rage, it was on my own basically. I did that kind of recording those instruments and producing the others on the box, like with virtual instruments. With films, if there is budget, I record real instruments. I finished like some months ago. I finished a film from the UK, a short film from the UK, and we got a string quartet for that. And
Nice.
it was awesome. I mean, the difference is it's great. Sometimes it also has more difficulties because virtual instruments have some advantages, which are like everything is in tune. So you don't have to like do various takes of the instruments so that they get it right, or they don't have to rehearse for months. The instruments are in tune, which especially in something like a string quartet is particularly hard to get like perfect tuning. So that's a good side of it, but there's a lot of difference in the end result, even if it is sometimes more hard work to do live recording sessions. It's totally worth it, but again, it also depends on the situation, because if I'm doing like more a more electronic soundtrack, I think I can produce those instruments pretty well and get very good results. But if it's something more acoustic, like a string quartet or a vocalist, then I of course need a live musician. On one of the games I'm doing right now, we're probably gonna have a live kind of a theme song that has vocals. So, and I can't do that. I mean, I have I have sung in choirs, but I'm definitely not the singer to get for that. So I'm definitely gonna try to hire a singer for that.
Right.
And so you worked on film, short films, video games. Which do you prefer?
Well, as I said, I prefer video games. I think I prefer video games. I haven't. The thing with films, if I were to score a feature length film by myself, which I haven't done that, like a 2 hour long film, the thing is that I would have that would take too much time because of how time works in the film industry. It's you usually have to put a lot of time in just like very few months, or maybe 1 month or something, and that's not something that I would be able to do and still do the other stuff that I do, which is like working on various musical projects, but also working at university here in Uruguay. Now I'm working quite a bit, and I'm also teaching music composition for games and films. So there's something about that timeline that I will probably do at some point, but it's not the easiest thing to kind of fit in my schedule. But with games, there are so many great things about doing that. But one of the things is that game development takes more time. So usually you can do a big soundtrack of like 40 songs or something, but you can do that over like 2 years. So at the same time, you're working on like 10 different things and either teaching or whatever. So that works with me because I'm a person that loves doing like a lot of stuff. So games are probably the thing that I love doing the most. But yeah, I don't want to like just work on one project at a time. So that's one of the benefits for me.
And Fight and Rage is probably the most known of your work. How did you get involved with that? Because I know it's a one-man developer team. Sebastian, he did it all, except for the music, obviously. So how did you contact him? Did he contact you? How did that come about?
Well, it's funny because I did something that usually like 99.9% of the time doesn't work, which is like send a cold email or a cold kind of. In this case, it was like a cold message on a message board or something. I don't really remember too much. It was a mailing list now that I think of it. And yeah, it was like me saying it was in 2013, and it was like basically, or 2012, I don't remember. It was basically like kind of me saying, I'm a composer. I would love to work on projects. Please let me know if you're a developer who has a game. I would like to work with you. And Sebastian was doing not Fight and Rage, but he was doing a game called Dreamnesia, or yeah, Dreamnesia. I'm not sure how you would pronounce it in English, actually. He was developing that game, and he was like actually wanting chiptune music, like chiptune inspired music.
Right.
And nothing that I had done was chiptune at all. None of my samples were chiptune, but he listened to the music that I did have on my demo reel, and he liked it enough to contact me and wonder if I would be interested in writing chiptune music. So I did some of that for that game, and that game wasn't released, which was a shame because I really liked it. wasn't released, but I did release the music. It's on an album called Dreamnesia, which also was like nominated for like best electronic album in the Uruguayan Music Awards, which are called like Graffiti Awards. So that was cool. It was a good experience, like writing my first album, even if it didn't end up on a game as I expected. But then he went on to work on Fight and Rage, and he basically called me with that. And he said, like, I'm not expecting chiptune music for this one. So we went for the more like rock oriented sound, but also with a lot of different influences, because one thing that I think Sebastian liked about my approach to making music is that I am very experimental, in the sense that I love learning about different styles of music, and love like kind of trying some of those on the game. So on that soundtrack, even though you listen to the trailer and it's like heavy metal, you can also hear many other influences like flamenco, which I happen to be studying at that same time, or salsa, or things like Latin music, or there's some electronic music influences as well. There's funk, there's jazz, there's a little bit of everything.
Awesome. So, who are your musical inspirations? Who do you look for inspiration for your music?
That's a very tough question, because
Besides Bob, I mean.
Well, I would love to listen to some of Bob's music. I haven't, but I know he's a musician and audio guy in general. So yeah, that would be cool.
Awesome.
So yeah, my first inspiration was a guitarist called Sean Lane, which is from the United States. He sadly passed away at 40 years old, and he was like a fusion guitarist, kind of sometimes classically inspired, but he ended up doing like fusions with Indian music and weird things like that. And I'm probably the reason why I started playing guitar had to do with him, mostly listening to him. In the non-soundtrack space, I also love like some people that are experimental but are not so academic, like a musician, a composer called Fred Frith. And there's a film about him called Step Across the Border. I totally recommend that. Then on films, like soundtracks for films, some of my favorite composers are Bernard Herrmann from Vertigo and Psycho and those Hitchcock movies, and Ennio Morricone I love a lot as well. And then video game soundtracks, I think my favorite video game soundtrack is by a composer that I don't even know if he composed any other music for video games. You might have heard of a game called Rule of Rose on PlayStation 2.
Yeah.
It's probably the most expensive PlayStation 2 game in the US, at least the American edition. But it has like a string quartet soundtrack with a piano, I think, and a vocalist on some tracks. I absolutely love that soundtrack, and it was an inspiration for a film I did. It was no inspiration for Fight and Rage, but I just listened to that music and it inspires me to make music for media. And the composers for Chrono Trigger, Nobuo Uematsu and Yasunori Mitsuda, I also really like. David Wise, I love, from Donkey Kong Country. And all the Castlevania music is very inspiring to me as well. I used to play a lot to Lament of Innocence, Castlevania Lament of Innocence. I'm not sure of the composer for that, who that is, but that's a game for PlayStation 2, and I really love that soundtrack.
Yeah, the guy who did Rule of Rose is Yutaka Minobi. I'm probably butchering his name. But he's done Eternio Arcadia, Space Channel 5, Panzer Dragoon Horda, Shinobi, Sonic Heroes, Shadow the Hedgehog, Rule of Rose, obviously, Yoshi Island DS, Sonic and the Dark Knight, King's Tale, Sonic Generations, Mario and Sonic at the London Olympics, Mario and Sonic at Sochi Olympics, at the Rio Olympics. Man, did a lot of Mario and Sonic games. So he has done lots of music.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's very cool. I wonder if the style of those of the music he wrote for that is similar to the one of Rule of Rose, because the thing I like about Rule of Rose is that it it doesn't really make too much sense to say this, but it doesn't really sound like a video game soundtrack in the sense that it goes like 100% for that for the aesthetic of the game, which it also works with the action of the game, but it's, I don't know, there's something about that music that sounds like it completely fits the visual aesthetic of that game. And I didn't even play Rule of Rose, but I heard that soundtrack and I watched some playthroughs, and it became my favorite soundtrack basically.
Yeah, it is a really interesting game. Very psychological. A lot of allusions to things, and what's the word I'm looking for, Bob?
I don't know. I can't read your mind.
Why not? Just that's what you're here for. Fuck, I can't even think. Basically, it's a lot of things standing in metaphors and things like that. Very
Yeah,
good game.
and it was a super controversial game, I think.
Yeah. So, sticking to game music, who would you like to work with if you were going to make a dream team of composers and musical game people? Who would you pick?
Oh, I don't know. Basically, the people that I mentioned, I think, in terms of composers. But the thing is, I do have a series of games which I would love to be involved with, which that is a Metroid series. That would be awesome. But I don't know in terms of composers. Basically, any of the people that I mentioned, the composer for Rule of Rose, from Chrono Trigger, Donkey Kong Country, Castlevania, also Lina Rhyne, or whatever that last name is pronounced. I'm sorry, Rhyne. From Celeste, I think that's pronounced in English. I really love that as well. So yeah, any of those people would be incredible, of course.
Not Tommy Tellerico, because to hook you up.
No, I didn't play to Earthworm Jim. I think that's probably the musical work he's more famous about. And yeah, I wasn't. Yeah, I wasn't exposed to much of his music in the 90s, which is where I think his career was. He was probably doing more work for video games.
Yeah, Ninja Kitty made me ask you. He's like, "Hey, ask him if he wants to work with
So I'm a little bit curious, like this may be a bit of a superfluous question, but like, do you have any preferences when it comes to brands of musical instrument? Like, what's your favorite brand for bass guitar, and also like any musical music tech equipment? Do you have any specific brands you lean towards?
That's a good question, but I'm actually not the best, not a good person to ask that question, in the sense that I don't really have those things.
Right.
So I don't know. My guitar is Ibanez, my bass guitar is Fender, but I try the instruments, and if they sound good to me and they seem like they won't break the first time
Yeah.
I drop them accidentally, that usually works for me.
So it's more of a choice in tone and quality and that sort of thing than actually like a preference to a brand.
Yeah, and budget, of course, because some of the instruments I bought when I couldn't afford, they were the best thing that I could afford at that time. And also, musical instruments in Uruguay are more expensive than in the US and probably the UK.
Right.
So what the instrument that I would love to have is a guitar that is kind of the signature guitar by the guitarist that I mentioned, called Sean Lane. He has like a guitar by Vigier is the company. They make music for they are from France, I think, like a family of luthiers or something. I don't think I'm pretty sure they are not making those guitars like Sean Lane signature guitars anymore, but I would love to have those. And if I ever go to Europe, I'll probably get one, or maybe in the US I can get one. But the thing is, when I went to the US, I made a stupid decision, which is bring my instruments with me. because I got like a Fulbright scholarship, and I did a master's degree in Chicago, in Columbia College Chicago, and I definitely shouldn't have brought my instruments with me or taken my instruments with me. I should have bought new and better instruments in the US because everything is a bit cheaper there then. But yeah, I did that, and then when I had to come back to Uruguay, I had to carry all the instruments that I brought to the US with me. So I didn't actually buy any new ones, which I totally should have.
Yeah, these Sean Lane signature guitars, they run for about $4,000 US. So not too cheap.
Not too cheap, yeah. And I remember seeing those like at 3,000. So I'm afraid that they are becoming older and rarer and more pricey. So I should do that soon. Actually, I should get one soon.
Yeah, probably invest. What were you gonna say, Bob? Sounded like you were gonna say something.
No.
I don't know, Bob. Do you have a brand that you recommend? I'm curious.
Not really. I mean, I do enjoy playing Ibanez guitars. I'm a bit partial to Ibanez. I've got an exotic wood acoustic. I want to get an RG350DX. My dad was always a big fan of Les Paul customs. I've got like a vintage 1979 Les Paul custom, but like it's super bassy. Like it's so bassy that it's like almost too bassy. So yeah.
Cool. Thank you. The instrument that is actually I think cheaper to buy in Uruguay is I have a classical guitar by a luthier called Ariela Meigenda, which is a Uruguayan luthier, and he exports his guitars to the US. But I got one. It was $3,000 or something. It was expensive, of course, but it's a guitar made by a luthier, and I really love that. That's better than pretty much any classical guitar that I could buy on a store. So that was a good investment as well.
Man, that sounds expensive.
Musical instruments are expensive, sadly.
Yeah. So I know you spent some time in Chicago. You were out here partying. What was your favorite part of the city?
Man, I that's another question that it's a good question, but I'm the worst person to ask that because I was doing a master's degree. As I said, I was working 20 hours a week as well, which was the maximum that my visa allowed me. And I'm a bit of a workaholic, so I didn't go out too much. So I lived in Little Italy, which is near UIC. You probably know that, Tony, or
Yeah.
you might know the area. And I did go downtown for school. Basically, Columbia College Chicago is in Michigan Avenue, I think. I may be remembering that wrong. But every part of Chicago that I walked, it was great. I mean, it looked beautiful. I didn't go too much to the west or the south, but I mean, any place near the downtown or the north was pretty awesome. But I don't have too many recommendations. I mean, I loved those parks that you have. Sorry, I don't remember the name of the parks, but the parks that are near the lake, I think. I think one is like Hyde Park or something. I may be remembering them wrong, but I absolutely love those. And they had like a jazz festival when I arrived to Chicago in summer 2018. I think they do that every summer, and it was like the best thing, like the best way to welcome me. It was like a festival that you could go basically for free in these like huge parks in the summer, which is great in Chicago. Not a huge fan of the winter, but the summer is awesome.
Yeah, the winters are not
And yeah, that's not very welcoming at all. Yeah, I really love that kind of first week spending time on those parks, listening to awesome bands, and yeah, probably those are some of my best experiences. Like the bands that I got to see in Chicago, like I saw Dream Theater. I saw Bob Dylan. Um, I saw a
Wow.
thereminist that I love. We were speaking about the theremin, a theremin from a thereminist from Germany that I loved. She was through in Chicago, and I also watched King Crimson, that I also have been like a huge fan since I was a child, or a teenager. So yeah, wherever there was music, those are some of my favorite places. Except for a place where I watched Buckethead, a guitarist. It was, I don't remember the name of the venue, but they treated people horribly there. But yeah, I don't remember the name of the place, but I do remember I left them a bad review on Yelp or something, because yeah, it was kind of weird.
So there you go, folks. If you look up Yelp reviews for parks, you might see Gonzalo's bad review. Man, I'm running low on questions, Bob. You got anything else?
I'm trying to come up with some good questions. So like, I'm curious about like your experience with, aside from the music composition side, your sound design experience. Like, is there any software you've particularly used before when it comes to sound design, or like anything you can tell us about your experience with designing sounds for games?
Cool. So yeah, that's something I'm doing now with I sadly can't speak about too much about the current games I'm working on, but on my Twitter account there's like a teaser trailer for one of them that was just like, the first teaser trailer was like published last week. So if you go to my Twitter account, it doesn't say the name there or anything, but it's by the developers of an indie game called Steel Assault, which was published by Tribute, which now did Tribute developed the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game. So I'm doing sound design more for games now. And the thing is that I come from my degree in composition. The bachelor's degree that I got was mostly in like contemporary music, or I don't know how you call it, but contemporary classical or experimental music. So with that, we had a couple of semesters of electronic music, but not like electronic dance music, but kind of electronic experimental music. So then I learned, I of course learned like how to use a digital audio workstation by myself, but then I learned programming languages related to sound, which like Pure Data and C Sound, and I really liked like that kind of low level work on like kind of a programming language where you have to like set up oscillators and work like with really basic stuff and kind of code the logic. Even though Pure Data is like a graphical programming language, you don't write too much code. You have to like set it up in boxes and connect those.
Yeah.
So as I said, I don't really do that much for games, but I really love like thinking about thinking kind of in a low level way. But then in terms of games, my digital audio workstation that I use for everything is Reaper. I've used pretty much all the others for one thing or the other. I've used Logic, Pro Tools, Ableton, whatever. But Reaper is my favorite DAW by far. So I definitely recommend that. And then I kind of use different synths depending on if I'm working on sound design. I probably use synths that just like BST synths, and many times I like as I said, kind of starting with something basic. So it's not like the synth alters my composition, my sound design process too much. I try to work with like basic oscillators and envelopes and that kind of stuff, and sometimes with samples, sometimes recording stuff and mixing both. And of course sometimes I go with the presets and listen to what those have to offer to me. But yeah, sometimes if I can like kind of solve it in a more low level way, that's usually better, even though it tends to be more time consuming, of course. So we have to balance that.
And when you compose music, how do you come up with your? Because I'm not musical at all, so I can't even wrap my mind around how you create music. But what is it that you do? Do you just sit down? You're like, boom, just knock it out. You got to watch a movie. You got to read a book, go for a walk. How is it that you get inspired to create the music that you create?
Usually, it's just putting the work with my instrument and try to come up with melodies. When I'm working on a game, it's super important for me to try the game, to not to come up with the melodies, but to see if something that I'm doing is working or not. Because sometimes you kind of become like focused on the melodies or on the rhythms or something, and they kind of work for you because you're doing them, and you're like, this sounds awesome. But then you try it in the game, and for one reason or the other, it doesn't work. So I think that's the most important thing to me is like either watching the film or if I'm doing music for media, either watching the film or playing the game and trying it with a music. So usually I ask the developer for either to allow me on GitHub or something to import the project, or to send me like executable demos of the game, instead of just working from videos or from things that they tell me. And then it's a matter of basically coming up with the melodies, the chord changes, of course the basic idea that I need to have, like, does this need to be a slow emotional melody or like an action oriented thing? Of course there are many decisions that I make in my head before trying out stuff. And I think it's a process more of like a spark of inspiration. It's more a process of improving stuff. So that's something that teaching really helped me develop. Like I now teach music for media courses, music for games and music for films. And I've learned because of teaching those things and giving other people, other composers feedback on those things. I kind of developed, I think, a kind of good. I don't know. I've done the experience of seeing if something works or not many times, and kind of rationalizing why it doesn't work or why it does work. And I think that's the most important aspect. It's not being the most inspired person or knowing the most chords or something, or being able to play as faster than anybody else, but kind of having that sensitivity of realizing if something works or not, and if not, how do I fix this? And also, if they tell me it doesn't work, like a developer tells me it doesn't work for some reason, also being able to kind of translate their way of thinking, which tends to be non-musical, because a developer won't tell you like that chord doesn't work, because if they knew that, they would be making the music themselves. But they will tell you like, this doesn't feel right, because I don't know, when the car comes on the, I don't know if it's a film, when the car comes, it doesn't seem like I don't know, emotional enough or whatever. So you have to like take that kind of feedback, which is non-musical, and translate it to musical resources and think like, oh yeah, maybe it's because, I don't know, I'm not making any chord change at that point or whatever. So I should do something with that, and trying those things. So yeah, I think most of the process about writing music, it's not about like that first musical idea. It's more about like trial and error, and trying to improve it, like if I was sculpting or something.
Wow, sounds insanely complicated, insanely difficult, but somehow you've mastered it. You've made it seem simple. Uh, Now you mentioned you worked on that game Dreamnasia that never came out, and I know it says that there was 5 tracks that were for the game, and then you developed additional tracks to fill out the album. But it doesn't say on the little page which tracks were the ones that were going to be in the game. So can you reveal which were the tracks that were going to be in the game?
Let me look at the track list, and I'll do that in a second. I'll try to at least, because it has been like 7 years or something. Yeah, 2015. So Sleepwalker, the second track, I'm pretty sure that was the first thing I wrote for that game. So that was my first composition for video game track ever. Harmonies of that's the second track on the album. Harmonies of Time, which is the fifth track on the album, that was for places where you would get like power-ups. There were like, it is a bit of like a mystical sounding track or something. It was like, I don't know, that game didn't have too much of a story, I don't think, or I don't remember, but it sounded kind of sacred or something, like you were discovering like a secret or something. Then Abandoned Souls was for pre-boss fights or something. So it's a piece that is supposed to make you feel uncomfortable, but it's not energetic as in a boss fight. It's just kind of prepping you for the boss fight.
Yeah, we listened to that before the show. Me and Bob were listening to it, and Bob was like, "This song sucks. It's terrible."
No,
like,
you're taking it wrong. No, I was saying that it's got quite a discordant, uncomfortable kind of tension building feel, and yeah.
I don't know. I think sometimes that's what you need in a game, but yeah, it's of course very subjective. But it's not a piece that is supposed to make you feel like super happy about listening to or playing the game. It's supposed to kind of make you feel uncomfortable and prepare you for a fight. And then Chamber of Sins, which is the seventh track, that was supposed to be the boss fight, and we did try that with the game. Oh, and then I made a mistake, because Over the Sky, the ninth track, that was the first thing that I ever wrote for a game. So yeah, it was, but that was for a stage that wasn't the first stage. So the first stage music was Sleepwalker, and those are the 5 tracks I think that I was referring to. Yeah, I think everything else I kind of composed after, just to finish the album, but many of the core melodies of the other tracks are actually from before, which is a good thing about making music. Sometimes you make it is a good thing of making music. Sometimes you make a melody or something and you just like kind of save it, store it on a file on your computer, waiting for the right time to come. So some of those melodies on the other tracks I probably composed on my first couple of years of making music, of like trying to learn guitar on, like, I don't know, 2008, 2009 or something. And they ended up on an album in 2015. And it's possible that on my, I don't know, next game soundtrack, you might hear tracks that have melodies that I kind of thought about when I was like, I don't know, 25 years old, like 6 years ago. But they just stay there, and then when I kind of revisit them, I kind of develop them in a way that fits a particular game. I arrange them in a different style. That also happened with Fight and Rage. Not all of those tracks started as Fight and Rage tracks. Not all of those melodies started as Fight and Rage melodies. Some of those I had been thinking about and I don't know, had played or something. And then I just saw the right opportunity, and it's not like you just can like copy and paste them and put them there. You have to arrange them in a particular way. But if they are good melodies and good ideas, you can probably, if you are a resourceful musician or something, you can probably make them work.
Yeah. So you sound like a very busy man. Sounds like you got a lot of things going on. So first off, I appreciate you stopping in and giving us some of your time. But we were curious if you still play video games in your spare time.
Well, yeah, I went back to playing video games because, yeah, I hadn't done too much of that. I love doing that, but yeah, I I don't know. It seems like making stuff is a better investment in some way. So I don't usually play a lot of games, but a couple of the latest games I played were Metroid Dread. I really like that for Nintendo Switch, and a game that Sebastian, the developer of Fight and Rage, gave to me as a gift for my birthday, which is called Ender Lilies. It's a Metroidvania game, kind of similar in style to Metroid, because it's of the same genre, if you will. And I absolutely love that the music from that game. I really like that game, Ender Lilies, it's called. But the soundtrack is particularly beautiful. I downloaded some sheet music for that and was also kind of learning those pieces on the piano. I really like those. But yeah, I have a Nintendo Switch. I actually got my Nintendo Switch when Fight and Rage was released on Nintendo Switch. It had Fight and Rage was released by Bleedworks on all consoles, and later had an edition by Limited Run Games, which also includes a CD with the soundtrack. And I was like, I don't know that I because of the fact that I collect games, I also like the idea of kind of collecting my games and being able to play the games that I worked on. So I really wanted to own a copy of Fight and Rage and be able to play it on a Nintendo Switch. Also because it was kind of a dream come true to have a game featured on a Nintendo console, and later also the physical edition. It's like when that would have been like really like impossible to imagine when I was playing games as a kid. That was like super emotional for me, and I wanted to own a copy of that for sure.
So do you take your Switch around and just kind of point to Fight and Rage and be like, that's the game I worked on?
No, actually, I do not. I don't take my Switch around. Sadly, my Switch is out of battery. Has been probably for the last, I don't know, maybe 6 months or so. So I don't usually play too much. And also, I do have some copies of Fight and Rage of the limited run games edition that they sent to me from Uruguay, but all of them except for one are closed in its original shrink. I don't know what you call it. Sorry, the shrink wrap. Yeah, because I don't know. I'm weird or something. But yeah, I don't know. I don't usually take it out too much. And if I play something on the Switch, it's not those games. Because I played a lot of. I love Fight and Rage, but I played a lot of it when it was being in development and a bit after that as well. I did play some of that on the Switch, but probably the game that I played most of in the Switch was Witcher 3, but I didn't get to finish that. I was like 55 hours or 60 hours in, and then I had to put it down because I was working too much, and it's hard to go back to. I don't remember pretty much anything about the story. And the other game that I played a lot was another game that Sebastian gave me, which is called Muse Dash. It's a rhythm game. It gets crazy hard after like some time on it. I think I spent like more than 10 hours on that. But yeah, I really like that as well. Usually, whenever somebody sends me a game as a gift, I do spend time on it because I feel like I don't know, like I should do it because they gave it to me and I got it for free, and yeah, they expect me to play it, and I really enjoy those. I really do appreciate those a lot, but I don't usually buy games. I also played some other ones like Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. I played that with a friend of mine, and we finished like Super Bomberman R with my girlfriend. Also on, I think it's Super Bomberman R. I don't know. On Nintendo Switch as well with my girlfriend a couple of weeks ago on her Switch.
Awesome. So I was gonna say, you does working on all these things, pick up chicks, does it work? But since you got a girlfriend, it's kind of I can't ask you that.
I suppose it must have helped in the fact that I've had some girlfriends, because otherwise it would have probably been tougher. So yeah, I suppose does help, but I'm not the popular kind of musician, because I think that the musician that gets those kind of opportunities are like the touring musicians, and I'm more like a nerdy musician who spends most of their time in their room instead of like touring and doing drugs and partying and that kind of stuff. I don't do too much of that, so yeah, I don't even get too many opportunities of meeting different people actually.
Not many groupies in the nerd music scene, huh?
Sadly, no. I don't remember too many female fans who wanted me to sign a copy of Fight and Rage of the soundtrack of Fight and Rage either.
Throwing their
Yet,
retainers on the screen.
There's always hope.
Yeah. Well, that's all the questions I had for today. I know you're working on some new games. You said when they get released, can we expect to see you come back, do a little more Q&A on that?
Definitely. As I said, it's a pleasure to talk with both of you. I have been listening to your show for, I don't know, I think a couple of months or so. So yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Well, I apologize for you suffering through 2 months or so of our show, because
well, I usually do that while I'm doing other stuff as well. So it's not like I'm like crossing my arms and expecting something interesting to happen. I'm like practicing sight reading or something on my piano, but it's good entertainment. It's good entertainment, but kind of in a background, So it wasn't suffering. I could have stopped that and put a podcast or something else, but it was a decision. It was a conscious decision.
We make good background noise.
Excellent. I just want to say thank you so much for the interview. It's been really enlightening. I've learned a lot, and it's really inspired me.
Well, thank you very much. I'm super glad to hear that. And yeah, please share your music. I would love to listen to some of it.
I will do.
All right. So once again, this has been Gonzalo Varela. I probably butchered that name, but it is what it is. Did the music for Fight and Rage. I suggest you play the game. It is actually a really good beat 'em up. Great music. Awesome soundtrack. If you're not going to play the game, at least listen to the soundtrack. Or go to YouTube. You can hear the Dreamnasia. Those are some good chip tunes. I was listening to it. Bob, he didn't like it as much as I did, but I was listening.
We only listened to like a minute of one track, and I never said I didn't like it.
I know. I'm just giving you crap. All right. You know how we do it here on this show. Love, peace, booty grease. We out this bitch.